From 1950 to 2016, it happened 487 times. 234 times it succeeded and 257 times not. It mostly occurred in Africa and the Americas. Our topic today is 10 coups and coup attempts throughout the history. One of the most famous conspiracies of all time against a political figure is the assassination of Julius Caesar. During a Senate session in Rome on 5th of March 44 BC, Caesar was stabbed to death by the conspirators. 4 years ago, Caesar got control over the government of the Roman Republic and soon proclaimed himself dictator in perpetuity. The senators were against the idea of having a dictator in power and thus turning the republic into a monarchy. So 60 Republican senators, led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Brutus, planned a plot against Caesar to murder him. But the public opinion was against the conspiracy, and thus Caesar's adoptive son Augustus, who will be later the first emperor of the new Roman Empire, captured and executed all conspirators one by one. After the French Revolution broke out in 1789, France went through a period of disorder, violence, war and major political crisis. In Robespierre's reign of terror from 1793 to 1794, everyone who would be considered as betrayer of the revolution had to fear to die under the guillotine. Many lives were lost due to this period of terror. All that comes to an end with the rise of Napoleon. In 9th November 1799, Napoleon seized power by a coup. The French Directory, the government of the First French Republic, was dissolved and replaced by the French Consulate, whose leader was Napoleon. The coup had public support because Napoleon was highly respected in the French society, including the army, because of his successful military campaigns in Egypt. This significant event was a cutting edge for Napoleon to proclaim himself as the emperor of the First French Empire 5 years later, and eventually for the Napoleonic Wars, which shaped Europe we know today severely. After the First World War, Germany, who lost the war, experienced political, social and economic turmoil. The future of the new German Republic, called Weimar Republic, was unclear. Street battles between far-right and far-left groups, assassinations of political figures or high unemployment rates were daily fare. Various individuals or groups with different political ideologies were aiming to abolish the Weimar Republic to establish a state according to their ideology. Before he seized power in Germany by elections and being the Führer of the Third Reich, Hitler tried to seize power by a coup. His plan was to get the support of the nationalist Bavarian government and politicians and thus to march on Berlin to overthrow the German government. In the evening of 8th November, Hitler stormed the pub Bürgerbräukellerputsch in Munich, where Bavarian ministers and politicians were present. He forced the politicians to take an oath that they support Hitler by his intention. Fortunately, the politicians rejected their promise to Hitler on the next day. Nevertheless, Hitler continued his plan. He began his march with his companions from the Bürgerbräukeller. However, he was stopped 250 meters later by the Bavarian police. After a gun battle between the insurgents and the police, many of Hitler's companions were shot dead and the remaining were arrested, including Hitler. In his time in prison, Hitler wrote his first book, Mein Kampf, which contained principles of his National Socialist ideology. Among certain Wehrmacht generals, Hitler awakened mistrust because of his aggressive foreign policy and later on his careless and blind decisions during the Second World War. Disgusted by the violent crimes in the concentration camps of the Nazis and to end the Second World War, a small resistance group was formed by Henning von Teschkow and Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg, two high-ranking military officers in the Wehrmacht. The plan, called Operation Valkyrie, was made of two major elements. First, to assassinate Hitler, and second, to arrest important heads of the SS, Gestapo and NSDAP. On 20th of July 1944, Stauffenberg flew from Berlin to the German headquarters called Wolfschanze in East Prussia, where Hitler was going to meet with his generals. Stauffenberg placed down a briefcase with a time bomb in it under the desk where Hitler held his conference. Stauffenberg flew back to Berlin, and in the meantime the bomb exploded but without killing Hitler. When Stauffenberg, who was convinced that Hitler died, arrived in Berlin, Operation Valkyrie was officially initiated but not executed in full scale. The reason behind this is because the conspirators were not sure if Hitler really died and were not informed clearly about their tasks. So the conspirators lost important time. The NS regime began to react and launched its countermeasures against the plot. As a result, many of the conspirators were either shot dead immediately like Stauffenberg, or captured and after their trial executed or killed themselves like Teschkow did. When Mohammad Mossadegh was elected as prime minister in 1951, Iran's oil reserves were under control of Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which belonged to Britain. Shortly after taking office, Mossadegh nationalized the oil reserves to benefit Iran, not the private oil companies. So Britain, under Winston Churchill, started to plan a military coup to overthrow Mossadegh and replace him with the pro-Western Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. With the pretext of the Cold War and Red Scare, the USA under President Eisenhower assisted Britain by the coup. Operation Ajax was launched on 9th August 1953. Mossadegh, the first democratic elected prime minister in history of Iran, was deposed by the Iranian army assisted by MI6 and the CIA. After that, the oil reserves were again under British control. The dictatorial Shah came back into power and provided the compliance of Anglo-American interests for 26 years until he was overthrown by his people. But that's a story for another time. Operation Ajax was the first coup planned by foreign countries to interfere in other countries' affairs and to design the politics of that country for their own benefits. This method was used many times by the USA in Africa, Asia and South America till this day to ensure US interests. Stay tuned for part 2 of this video, where we look at 5 other countries which experienced coup d'etats.